Hey guys, this is Bruce. Welcome to Convocourses podcast. And we got open topics talking about governance, risk, and compliance. Now, if you guys don't know who I am, my name is Bruce. I've been doing IT since the year 2000. Mostly in my career, I've been doing something called governance, risk, and compliance. It's a branch. It's not really a branch of cybersecurity. I would argue that it is cybersecurity. Um, but essentially, it's where we are looking at the entire organization's security, not just how, can we defend against hackers or something like that. We're looking at physical security. We're looking at personnel security. Is everything documented properly? We're looking at disaster recovery. How do we recover if we do get attacked? We're looking at the whole big picture of every aspect of our organization's risk, and we're trying to manage the risk by having great management. That's governance. We're trying to manage the risk by complying with government standards and industry standards. And that's the compliance piece, this governance piece, risk portion of it, and then compliance. That's GRC as a whole. So what I do is I look at everything in the organization and say, okay, how can we protect our assets and our information and the resources, the people who are doing the work, right? So we're looking at a big picture approach. It's not just playing whack-a-mole like your average cybersecurity person might be doing if they're a SOC analyst or if they happen to work at as an incident response person, or if they're an IT, a help desk person who is doing trouble tickets. We're looking at every aspect of the organization and saying, how can we manage our risk effectively? And that takes processes, it takes procedures, it takes certain things that you have to do on a regular basis in order to protect that organization and to, well, manage the risk. Lower the level of risk that you have. You're gonna have to have some level of risk. There's no way you're gonna get rid of all of it. Um, we're going to look at all aspects to that lowers our risk, and the way that you do that is documenting what process you have. To give you a specific example, um, if an organization has, let's say you had a healthcare organization who is in downtown LA, right? And they need to protect their resources. Now they know that there's certain mishaps and threats that can happen, right? Maybe they are right by near Skid Row and they know that there's vagrants of people walking around. It's an unfortunate part of society, but it's something that they have to deal with on a daily basis. So now they have physical security as a possible threat of people just walking in and just laying on their floor or whatever. That's something that they have to document a process. They have to write down a process, say, okay, how are we going to deal with a vagrant walking up in here? And maybe what they do is they get 24-hour security. They know that they have to have a 24-hour security to make sure that people are not loitering, so that when a patient comes in, they don't have to be afraid. There's no mishaps with that issue of people coming in off the street or whatever and interrupting their services for their clients. Another thing that they might be wary of is earthquakes. Los Angeles is a place that gets earthquakes from time to time. So they don't have to panic about it, but what they need to do is have something in place to say, okay, in the event of an earthquake, what are we going to do? Do we have a site that's located somewhere else that can maybe back up all of our data somewhere else? So that if this site goes down, we can send our stuff up north to Nevada. Maybe they have another site in Nevada and they back up all of their main patient information over there. So governance, risk, and compliance is saying, what risks do we have and how can we protect our system so that we can continue to do our main business function and and operate accordingly. So that is what GRC is all about. And GRC is not just, of course, it's not just for healthcare. It's for governments, U.S. government, Chinese government, Iranian government. Every government has to have some form of GRC. They don't call it GRC all the time, but they're going to have a governance, risk and compliance to manage the level of risk that is in their industry. It's in every industry. It's in the gaming industry. If you happen to be in Las Vegas, Nevada, where they have a huge gaming industry there, it's in hotel restaurant management. They have to take people's credit card information. They have to protect all people's credit cards when you walk in. They've got to protect their privacy of where they stayed. They have to have certain procedures in place to protect the documents that they have to sign when you go into the hotel and say, yes, this is my name. I'm staying here. There's 3 people with me, blah, blah, blah. They have to protect those records that they keep. They have to keep them for a certain amount of time, and they have to protect those records. They have them in the retail sector, Walmart, TJ Maxx. All of these people have a gigantic IT department that is working all the time to not only troubleshoot issues with logistics and systems that they use to process orders, but also they need a security unit to make sure that if there's fraud going on, they have a fraud alert. What do? We have an incident response team to deal with losses, data loss prevention as a whole. You have to have a whole department, and that's where GRC comes in. GRC is about how can we protect our bottom line, and that is why I've remained gainfully employed all of these years, because that's what I do. And there's no shortage of it, and there's tons of jobs. Even when the market goes down, or there's an economic downturn or something like that, somebody always needs this service. And it's a great time to be in cybersecurity. And if you're interested in getting in this field, you've come to the right place, because I'm going to tell you the truth from within. I actually do this. I'm doing this job. I'm a part-time content developer. All right. My actual job is doing GRC work. That is my job. So I'm going to tell you the truth about how to get in, what you should do. And I'm going to use the backing of my 20 plus years of experience to tell you the government side, because I've been working for the government, inside the government, and as a contractor, and in the private sector that had nothing to do with the government. I'm going to tell you from my perspective, from my experience, how to get in, what I think you should do. And this is a great opportunity to talk to somebody who's on the inside and ask any questions that you like. All right. So I've been talking to people on TikTok for a while. They've been joining me. And I'm going to answer some of their questions right now. Somebody said GRC is the most and least technical of security branches. Is most important. Sorry, I misread. So they said GRC is the most important and least technical of the security branches. I would say that is absolutely true. It's not talked about. It's not fantasized about like hacking, pen testing, or analyst work is. Those all of those parts of cybersecurity have a place in Hollywood. People talk about it. People fantasize about it. They think they know what those things are. Forensics, that's another one that's so sexy that everybody wants to do it. But GRC doesn't get that kind of notoriety. It's something that it's a boring job that sits in the background, that if we didn't have it, there'd be absolute chaos. Absolute chaos would ensue if we didn't have GRC. Because think about it, it's governance, management of the infrastructure, risk management, making sure we're not taking too much of a crazy risk with people's information or with our systems, and then compliance, making sure that the banking industry is doing what they're supposed to do to protect our banking information, right? So if we didn't have these things in place, essentially we wouldn't have learned from history, because compliance comes from the history of what we've learned, all the knowledge we've amassed in our different industries, in the healthcare industry, and the meat packing industry, and the telecom industry. All of these industries started as an egg. It started as a baby, and it just grew over time. And we learned to apply certain security features, certain things we need to comply with to make it safer for all of us to live together as a cohesive society. Governance is the glue that holds all this stuff together. Governance, risk, and compliance is the glue, and that's why it is the most important thing. The technical stuff, the stuff that's in the weeds, it's important, right? You need to do that. In the same way, you need capillaries in your body, right? They're extremely important. You need to have those little branches that go, but you also need the artery and the heart. And the GRC is the artery, the heart, and the brain. It is all of that stuff. It's not talked about, but it is there. It is extremely important. So I absolutely agree with you on that point. Does GRC get paid more than security engineers? It depends, Jay, because it depends on what you're trying to do. Like if you're, I'll give you an example. Like right now, I work as a 3-letter federal organization. I'm a contractor, um, and I am an information system security officer. I'm a principal information system security officer. There are people above me. There are people who are doing GRC just like me, but they are my boss. I've got supervisors, I've got bosses above me, and I'm sure they make more money than me, right? They're doing more work, in some cases doing more work than me, or doing something, some management stuff. They're getting paid more. But they're in GRC. And then take your average security engineer. Now, on my team, I have security engineers. On my team, we have what we call information system security engineers. Not directly doing the documentation, doing all the meetings. They're more like when something goes really wrong or our scanning is not working properly. We have some people who know scripting really well. They know Python. They're in the weeds doing they're the guys turning the wrench. So they'll join meetings when something goes really wrong. They're the ones who are engineers. Think of it as the people who are making sure the infrastructure, the pipes are tightened and all that kind of stuff. They're making sure everything's is we can do our job effectively. And some of those guys make more because maybe they're a manager. Some of them make about the same amount. It depends on, it's not a matter of, when it comes between a GRC position and a security engineer position, they're around the same band. You'll know how much money people make, or if they make more or less based on their position. Meaning, if they're a manager, normally they're going to get paid more. If they are a principal person, like somebody who's maybe a go-to person that people come to, they have more years of experience, whatever, they get paid a little bit more. And then you've got your regular person, like maybe they're a junior person and they're working underneath somebody, or they have a mentor or whatever. They're going to get paid a little bit more. It's position based. So it also depends on what organization you work for, because some organizations pay a little bit more than others, like your FANG organizations who also have engineers and GRC workers. They will pay a little bit more. FANG means like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, and those organizations. They tend to pay a bit more. So it depends on where you're at. Whereas the government doesn't pay competitive with those guys, but they pay pretty good, right? So depends on where you are. Another thing is GRC is a gigantic. That's a really huge space. It's governance, risk, and compliance. So it's management. So managers in the G is governance, which means management. Those guys are going to be paid a little bit. Usually they're going to pay paid more. Risk management depends on your skill set, how much experience you have. Depends on what you're doing. Architects get paid really good. So if you're a risk management person who's an architect, and you're going to get paid probably more than managers do. But the average risk consultant, risk manager is not going to get paid, or a risk management person who's consulting is not going to get paid as much as like a manager or a director or a C-level exec in the governance. Then you got the C, compliance. That's probably what you're talking about. Compliance people, where I'm at, it really depends on a few things. It depends on the organization. What state you're in is a big factor, because some states get pay more at a higher level than others. But it also depends on your skill set, what certifications you have, if you're super competitive, if you're in an industry that requires a security clearance, then that is also can be a factor. There's a lot of different factors. Overall, I say GRC and security engineers are around the same. But then when you get into positions, it's going to adjust it up and down. All right, I got some questions here. Thank you guys for joining me on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and all these other places. Let me see. Paul says, "Hi, Bruce." And somebody, I'm seeing this for the first time. Somebody says, as such, GRC is a bedrock of cybersecurity, including PCI, DSS, and the rest. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the bedrock. It's the glue that sticks everything together. Absolutely. And that's in every organization in every industry. So retail, they're going to rely heavily on PCI DSS. Government relies heavily on stand and regulations like FISMA and standards and frameworks like the NIST 800 to tell them what security controls do we need? How do we manage these security controls every year? How do we do continuous monitoring? They rely heavily on those types of things. Every industry does this. The healthcare industry, IT consulting industry, hotel restaurant management, pharma, all these industries have some sort of bedrock that helps to guide them through the GRC process. Paul says, Bruce, I've been working IT 15 years, some networking, PC repair, QA, automation. More recently, did a master's in cybersecurity, CISSP, and Google Cloud. I worked I work for a huge organization and okay, information security manager for 2 years, covering everything GRC. Some exposure to ISO 27001. Now I'm working as a cybersecurity GRC officer for a group of universities. Oh man, that's awesome. That's great. And I am implementing a ISMS for the whole organization. Everything is mostly in the cloud using NIST 853 for universities. Wow, that's interesting. I have seen universities use NIST 853 though. So, a lot of it's lots of risk, which is which is great. I'm learning lots. I am going to do the CCSK and we'll do the CISA next year. I wanted to ask you, is it possible to get a remote job, a remote work going this side, going on this side? In my job, I could work 9 months and 3 doing my own thing. Eventually, I would love to work for myself doing remote work. I just don't know if I'm ready or if it's possible. Well, Paul, actually, you're lined up to do remote work. So I thought the same thing. Like when you're not doing it, it doesn't even seem real. So my situation was worse than yours. Like worse in that there's fewer remote jobs for my specialty. I was a vet coming out of the military. I knew government inside and out, especially Air Force and Army, because that's most of the work I did when I was in was with those two branches. I knew how they did security. I knew their standards, everything. I had a CISSP. I had a Security Plus. I had a secret. I had a security clearance. And I really wanted to work remotely. And I was just like, how can I do that? How can I work remotely? What can I? How? What can I do? Like, I want to spend more time with family. I just want to be home. You know, I don't want to commute anymore. How can I do it? When you first think about it, it doesn't seem possible. And then every time you hear somebody talking about it, they have this dream scenario where like, of course you're a software engineer. Of course you're working from home. Of course, but no, here's what I learned. Here's what I learned. The And I did this before COVID, by the way. I started working remotely before COVID. Important note, because COVID is when everybody started talking about remote work, but I was doing it before that, like for years before that. And so what I realized when I started thinking about it, number one, I was like, how is this even possible? What I realized is there's a huge field. There's so many jobs that are looking for your skill set working remotely. So many. But so there's pros and cons. Number one, you're in luck. There's tons of them right now. There's so many. The bad news, the con is they are competitive because everybody wants them. Um, doing what you do, everything you just listed, you're way more prepped than I was. You working on a CISP, or you have one. You do you have a cloud, Google Cloud. You know ISO 27001. You know NIST 800 53 and 37. You're already doing a bunch of work for universities, and so you are way more prepped to do remote work than I am. You just, number one, get in your head that it's possible. And you said you added a caveat here or something, maybe I missed. You said working for myself, for others. Yeah, it exists. It totally exists. So number one, believe that it's real, because it is. I'm doing it. Working for yourself, I have the opportunity to do that. It's called 1099. So whenever I work remotely, whenever I go to another organization, they ask me, well, there's two different kinds. Like there's a W-2, which is you're an employee working for them, but that's still 100% remote. They just take the money out of your account to do your benefits, or they have to pay your taxes, all that kind of stuff. Or 1099, where you are working under your own name or a business or whatever you happen to put on that 1099 form, but they don't pay your taxes. You pay your taxes. You are a business. But I've done both of these things. So then the first thing is to believe that, to understand that there's so many jobs out there. And if you don't believe me, the best thing I could do is show you. So what I'm about to do, if you happen to be watching me on YouTube, you're in for a treat, because I'm about to show you my LinkedIn page, which I've done before, but I'm going to show you how I do it. I'm going to step by step tell you, Paul, exactly how I do this. Let me see here. Here we go. So here I am on LinkedIn. And let me show you something. Here we go. So number one, let me show you. This is my real LinkedIn page, by the way. I'm going to show you how you could do this. So let's say you wanted to get a job doing ISO 27001. I just want to show you that they exist, number one, and then we'll branch out from there. I just typed in ISO 27001, which is an international standard. Now I'm going to click jobs, and there's about 5,300 jobs. Now, my LinkedIn page is fully filled out. So the results you see are based off of, are targeted towards me. Really important caveat here. You need to fill out your entire LinkedIn page, the entire thing. So anyway, there's 5,400 jobs. It's looking for mostly jobs in Colorado because it knows that that's what I like. And then it's looking for remote jobs already because it knows that that's, it's, my page is queued in towards that. Now, let me take you to some filters. So right now I'm going to go here. You just click remote, and then I'm going to check this box, remote, and let's see how many jobs are available that are 100% remote. Not hybrid, 100% remote. So ISO 27001 jobs in the United States, I think it's looking for the last 90 days. There's 1,000 jobs that are remote, looking for you. Right? There you go. 1,000 jobs. Now, not all of these jobs are going to be stuff you want to do. There's a GRC consulting job. which is exactly what we're talking about. Here's another one: GRC consulting job, risk consulting. Oh, you get the idea. There's tons of jobs out there for this. Now, let's take it a little bit further. Now, if we're really serious about this, well, actually, you said that you wanted to work. Let's see if we can find one for. You said you wanted to. Oh, I can't find that filter. Let's look at all filters. Okay, so I just sorted for all filters. I'm looking for a way that we can find 1099 jobs. That would be contract work, is one way to find it. But if I were you, I'd look at all jobs. But let's just, for the sake of doing this, let's just go ahead and look for all just contract jobs for now. Some of these are going to be 1099 type jobs. And there's usually short-term jobs. They pay higher, like this one right here. Senior security engineer is paying $80 to $95 an hour. These are usually contracting 1099 jobs if they're paying that much money. Meaning they don't pay your taxes, you pay your taxes. This right here is something you could do. Let's look at this next one, lead auditor. This one doesn't have the amount that it's paying, but it's a mid-senior level person that this one's going to be paying a lot. Let's look for senior consulting technical. See GRC. Here we go. This is SAP GRC. I don't know if that's your specialty, but let's take a look at it. Now, another thing to note is that, like I said, these jobs exist, but they're very competitive. Look how many applicants so far in just 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, 100 people have applied for this job. So how do you get this job? Now, that becomes a question. How do you get these jobs? You got to be very, very aggressive to get the job. Very, very aggressive to get the job. That's how you get it, is to be very, very aggressive. And there's a few things you need to do. Number one, fill out your entire profile on LinkedIn, the whole thing. And don't just do LinkedIn, do Monster, do Dice, do Indeed, all of them. And then apply for as many of these as that you're qualified for. You said, do you get, let me see. Do you get GRC work that you do in the evening out of your normal work? Do you get GRC work that you do in the evenings out of your normal work? I don't know what you mean by that. Are you talking about being overemployed? Like where you have two different jobs? You're gonna have to explain that one to me, Paul. But anyway, let me just explain what I'm looking for, how we're looking for these. Another thing you want to do, now, like I said, I would not just look for contracts. I would look for everything, because that's going to broaden. You'd be surprised. There'd be some jobs that come up that you can do where you don't have to be a contractor. You can be a full-time or whatever. But let's look at jobs posted. Let's look at, we don't want any time. We want things in the last, at least in the last, probably last week if we're serious. You notice it goes down from 1,000 to 300. So these are all remote jobs that are posted in the last week. These are hot. It just came out. So let me look at one GRC job, and I'll talk about the overemployment stuff in a second. That's what you're asking about. Also something I've done before. We got something to say about that. All right. So we're looking at information security compliance specialist, right? Here we are. Information security compliance specialist. This is something you could do. It's writing SOPs, it's conducting assessments. It looks like NIST 800, ATO. Yeah, this is something you can totally do. You would apply for this job. This one's coming from DICE. You would apply for any job that you are qualified for. You wouldn't apply for all of them, because it's very, very aggressive when you're looking for remote jobs. Now, what you're really looking for is overemployment. So let me just tell you a couple things about overemployment. Overemployment, that's what we call it. Overemployment. It means, for those of you who don't know, you work two jobs. You have one main job working from home or whatever, and then you take on another job. How do you do it? What's the fallback? What? Because you could totally do that. There's enough jobs for that. So pros and cons about that. Pros, obviously, you get paid like crazy. It's like so much money. Cons is that you get burned out really fast. If you have a lot of meetings, like GRC has a lot of meetings, this is nonstop meetings. You really need a supportive family to do stuff like this. Your family has to be on board, is what I'll say. Some of the pitfalls is you want to do it legally. So you don't want to do anything that's a conflict of interest. I'll explain. So if you have a contract where you're working with Department of Energy and they have, you don't want to do one working with Lockheed Martin and one working for Northrop Grumman, who are two competitors, and you're working for both of them. That's illegal. Don't do that. If you are working for Department of Interior, you work for them, and then you're offered a 1099 job to work that has a contract with the Department of Interior. There's certain things you gotta be careful with the conflict of interest, is what I'm telling you. So don't do that. Don't avoid that at all costs. I would work at two different separate industries. Two separate industries. I'll give you a specific example of what I did. So I'm working for the government. I'm working part-time, and a pharma company came to me and wanted me to write some SOPs for them. And they pay me a crazy amount of money to do that per hour. And I was working that job, and I was flat out told them, I said, look, I got another job. This is my job. It's my full-time job. And I can only work for you guys X amount of hours a week. Right. And they were like, that's fine. We just want these documents done by X day. Can you get those done? Can you get these 20 documents done by this month, by 3 months or whatever they gave me? And I said, well, let me take a look. I looked at it and I said, okay, yeah, I can do this. Right. But I can only work a max of 20 hours. And if I could work more, I'll let you guys know, but a max of 20 hours a week. And here's my job hours. I work from these hours here, so I can work for you for these hours. So I gave them a schedule. Here's where I can, because it was a serious amount of work. And so I had to be very upfront with them that their work came second, but I was going to get their stuff done. And I had to let them know, if I was missing meetings or whatever, because they had meetings, everything. If I missed meetings, I have to let them know, hey, I'm on another call right now. Can I get back to you or whatever? And there were some meetings I couldn't hear. A couple things. There was some meetings with both I could not meet. I couldn't miss. That was tricky. There was sometimes they would call in the middle of my work day, that's not cool. So just what I'm trying to tell you is it is possible you can do it, but don't have conflicts of interest. Make sure your family is on board. If you have family, let them know how much hours you're going to be working, because it can fuck your family up. Don't do it unless your family knows what's going on. Right. And then I would have a limited amount of time. I would not do it permanently. I would say, I'm only going to do this for 3 months. I'm only going to do this for 2 months. I'll take the side contract. And then your other question was, when do you work? When do you find time to work? That's going to be based on each situation. But I would make it clear that you can only work a certain amount of hours and then certain days of the week or whatever. Just make it clear with them what's going on. That way, they're not blindsided when you're on another meeting with your main job, and then they're like, hey, we expect you to be here, and why isn't this done yet or whatever. You can just tell them, listen, this is my job. And the reason I learned this is because the first time I did it years ago, the first time I was employed by two different organizations, and holy shit, man, I was working. I had a full 40, which is not possible. I was working 30 plus hours with both companies, and I got number one, I got burned out. I was doing both, but I got burned out. The meetings were crazy. I would start missing meetings and stuff. I got burned out, and then I just at the end of the day, I didn't want to do anything, right? Luckily, my spouse at the time was supportive, but it was not the way to do it, and I was doing it in secret. I wasn't telling each company what I was doing, right? Which was really dumb. And don't do that. So make sure your company that you're working for knows what's going on. Make sure both of them know, hey, look, I'm moonlighting. I'm doing this over here. I'm only going to do it for 2 months or whatever. You'd be surprised. Like, usually they're cool with it, especially if you tell them up front, like, this is what I'm doing. I don't work during your hours. Make it clear. I work during my own hours. I work on Saturdays, Sundays. you know be clear with them, so especially if you have a good ass job. Like, if you're working a good ass job and you don't want to destroy your relationship with that good ass job, let them know what you're doing and say, I'm a consultant on the side. I'm doing this after hours. I'm doing this on my days off. I just want to let you guys know what I'm doing. It's in a whole nother industry. This is what I'm doing over here. Right. So that way there's no conflict. And it might be even that it's so completely different that you don't let them know, because they don't, if you're doing it on your own time, it's private information. Like, you don't, if it's completely outside of what you're doing, like you're a part-time chef on your own time. You know what I mean? Like, it's completely a different thing, then maybe they don't need to even know about that. Um, you code for on your off time to this other bank, and you work in the government sector or something. It's two things that have nothing to do with each other. There, maybe you don't have to tell them, right? It's not going to conflict at all. There's no conflicts. You're not working extra hours. It's not even in the same remote industry. You, that. But yeah, you said the university lets you do it. Yeah, so I would just let them know, like, here's what I'm doing. I. There's just certain things you don't want to do. Don't have a conflict of interest. That's illegal. If you sign an agreement with this company, and this happens, like, I'm gonna only work for you guys during these hours of Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. p.m. whatever it is, and I'm only working for you. I'm not moonlighting during those time, because that's when you guys are paying me. If you sign a contract saying that that's what you do, then don't breach your contract with this company, right? Especially if it's a good company. Don't betray their trust, and then do your own thing on your own, on their time that you're supposed to be working with them. Don't do that. That's not a good look. That's not a good look. Because they could destroy your reputation in this industry. And if, like, let's say you do your 5 years with these guys or whatever, and then you want to go do another job, and or hell, they want to promote you or something, and they find out you've been doing all this other stuff, and you're not doing a good job with them. They're not going to vouch for you when you try to level up, when you go to another company. Don't burn your bridges, right? And if you have a conflict of interest, or you're doing some shady stuff in the background, and that stuff comes up, you're gonna burn that bridge. Don't burn in cybersecurity. You don't want to burn bridges, so don't do. Just, it's not worth it. You don't even have to do that. It's not even necessary. Don't burn that money bridge. You know what I mean? Don't do conflict of interest. Don't burn bridges. Abide by whatever contracts or agreements you have with that organization. It's very simple. And then on your own time, do that 1099 or whatever. How do you find it? LinkedIn, Dice, Monster. You can find those jobs. It's competitive to find them, but once you start putting yourself out there, they'll find you. Actually, they will find you once you start putting yourself out there. But you got to put yourself out there and tell people I'm open to remote work. On your actual resume, on your profile, say open to remote work, and they will find you. Hope that helps, Paul. Let me see here. Got some more TikTok questions. Jack says, if you had to give percent of coworkers, hires, etc., how many were college or military? What's the split? Okay, Jack is asking if I had to give a percentage of my coworkers who were hired, how many had college or military or what? And Paul says, great advice and wanted to stay in GRC. I love it. I wish I got into this years ago. Yeah, you're welcome, man. So what is the split for my coworkers? So I'm working in a specific industry. I'm working in the government. So the split is going to be a little bit different depending on what industry you're in. You should know, Jack. I would say where I'm at right now is a bit different. Let me see. Out of 10 of us in my office, my coworkers, let's say 10 of us to keep a nice round number. How many have degrees? Let me see. I would say at least 80%. I don't even know anybody who doesn't have a degree. I would say at least 80 to 90% have a degree where I'm at. The most alarming thing. Wait, military. Let's see. What percentage have military? Background. Let me see. Me, out of the 10 of us, it's a little less actually. It's about 40% of us have military background. 40% of us, of the 10 of us. I mean, there's probably 4 of us who have a military background. Yeah, 4 is not many, but most of us have a degree because that's one of the requirements. The degree is a part of the requirement of getting this particular position. But not all jobs are like that, just so you know. The most alarming thing is how many immigrants there where I'm working, because there's a lot. Not like they're green card holders, like people who are first time, they weren't born in the US. There's a lot. I was shocked. I'm like, damn, that's crazy. What percentage of them? It's about this one dude from 2 from Nigeria, 2 from East, 1 from. It's like 50%. I'm like, damn, this is. I mean, it's cool. I'm just saying, I'm shocked how many immigrants there are in our shop. So out of 10 of us, 4 of us are 3 or 4 of us are military, not many. I work for a 3-letter agency. The last job, most of us have degrees because that's part of the requirement of the job. The last job I was at was it was like a part-time pharma job. I was overemployed doing part-time pharma, and of let me see. Of 3 of us that were working the main part of the job, one dude was from India. He's an American guy, but he's an immigrant here from India. And then all of us had degrees, all 3 of us, and I was the only military guy there, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure I was the only military guy. And then if I go further back than that, NASA, we had about It's about 10 people working. And what percentage of had a degree? Again, the requirement was to have a degree. So most of us, I'd say 90% of us had a degree. And if they didn't have a degree, I don't know how the hell they were there because most of us had it was a requirement. Um, how many were military? A lot were military there. It was at least 50% military, 50 to 60% military. Yeah, most of us were military there. Immigrants, there might have been one. That was at NASA. And so yeah, that's the splits. It depends on the industry. I think it's going to be different from each industry, right? It's going to be different for each industry. Because I've been places where you didn't have, not everybody had a degree, or there were some people who had, okay, places where I went where they didn't have a degree. There were a couple places in the Department of Defense that I work with people who didn't have a degree, but normally they were very, very brilliant people. Crazy smart people that I worked with, and they didn't have a degree because they were 20 in their 20s with already they were 29 with 9 years of experience doing that one thing, and they were just really, really good at what they did, right? So they started in the military and did nothing but one thing really well, and were brilliant at this one thing, and they hired them specifically for that thing, and they didn't have a degree because they had the experience. Like, was so overwhelming that they didn't need one. Let me see. What would you think to learn first? What would you think to learn first? GRC or SOC analyst or incident response? The first thing to learn would be the fundamentals of IT fundamentals. Like, if it depends on where you're starting from. Like, if you're starting from scratch, then the thing that you're gonna have to start with is gonna be the IT fundamentals. Like, the basics of IT is where you're gonna want to start. Um, that's where you're gonna have to start, and then work your way up from there. If you're, let's say you already have a strong foundation for IT, you have the knowledge base in your head. You've been working help desk or somewhere for some time. You're hands on with IT already. Now where you go from here? Like, do you do GRC first or SOC analyst? And I would say it depends on what you want to do. It depends on what you want to do. Out of those two, if you were only given those two choices, GRC or SOC analyst, incident response type work, where would you start? If you're more hands on, I would say SOC analyst would be smart. It would be a better start. If you want longevity, some boring longevity that's not shakable, GRC for sure. Um, it really depends on where you're trying to go. Overall, if you were coming from help desk, okay, let me just be honest with you, okay? If you're coming from help desk, like, you already know the basic IT stuff, that's not really your question. You're already an IT person. Now you're trying to transition into one of these things. I would say SOC analyst, and here's why. From SOC analyst work, the stuff you're going to learn from that, it will allow you to go into GRC. You can go deeper into incident response. You're going to know enough to where you can go into something called cyber threat intelligence if you want it. You could probably be a full-blown intel analyst. You could go into forensics a little bit. Like, you already are messing around with some of the tools in forensics. You can go deeper into that. You can go management. You might even be able to become an auditor. Like, if I would say it's probably better if you're going from help desk to SOC analyst work, because SOC analyst has a pivot point to where you can go anywhere else you want to go. Whereas GRC, especially if you're not technical, it kind of pigeonholes you a little bit. Like if you're not technical, you got a longer way to go. I'm not saying it pigeonholes you, but you're gonna have more things you're gonna have to do, especially if you don't have a technical longer. You know what I mean? Like it's gonna be more for you to do. Whereas this SOC analyst, you already have all that technical part under your belt. So now you can go GRC, you can go management, you can go pen testing, you can go forensics, you can just go all these other directions because you've learned so much about networking, incident response, you've learned about the organization, you have an internal look on the operations of everything. You probably could have messed around with some documentation, some reporting, creating reports, like you getting like a bigger taste of all the things cybersecurity. Whereas GRC, now granted, GRC is a very broad field, so it depends on what part of GRC. But if we're talking about just a compliance person, it's with no technical background, it's going to be very narrow. If you're talking about management with no technical background, it's kind of narrow. Risk, if you're a risk person, that aligns a little bit with SOC analyst work. Like if you're doing risk consulting, you might have to know how people hack. You're gonna have to know something about networking. You're gonna have to know command line interface on different operating systems. You might have to know some more technical skills. So GRC kind of bleeds. There's a portion of GRC that bleeds into SOC analyst work. So when you say GRC, it's a very broad term, but I'm assuming you just meant like compliance. Okay. Hope that answered your question. Let me see here. Hey Larry, how you doing? Yeah, I had to do this early, man. I got some stuff to do today. Ryan, my man Ryan, how you doing, man? I was just checking out your book this earlier today. Um, Ryan has a free book that walks you through CGRC, and it is magnificent. This is the kind of stuff that you want to look for out there. It's a rare find because it's coming from somebody who's in the industry, who's writing a book. Some people in this industry will make content, but they're not really in this industry. They're content creators who see an opportunity to make stuff. But in Ryan's case, he is a actual governance, risk, and compliance guy who wrote a CGRC book to help you to pass the CGRC certification. And his question or comment is, if I were starting off the basics of IT, um, I'd say, uh, I'd say document analyst. Everyone's got to pay the Pied Piper sometime. Oh, you mean SOC analyst, SOC analyst. Yeah, SOC analyst. Yeah, I'd say the same thing, Ryan. Like, I'm just thinking about it. I was like, haven't done both those things before, fully done those things before. Being a SOC analyst, it just like there's so many different ways you can pivot from a SOC analyst work. So, and it gives you that hands-on, that's really important. As a GRC person, doing compliance, writing documents, working with vulnerability management, doing continuous monitoring, whatever, happens to be your piece in this. Even being a manager, it's the more you know about the technical piece, the more you're hands-on, the more you know about the security operations, the actual thing that's going on with monitoring the organization, the more you know about it, the more effective you'll be as a manager because you'll have an idea of what the big picture is. You have a better, more granular understanding of what's happening in your organization or in any organization. Being a SOC analyst, you'll have all the pieces you need to know how to manage risk better. That you won't have a blind side. You have a less of a blind side. All of us have a blind side, but you have less of a blind side if you know how to do SOC analyst work, because you'll have seen the types of crazy stuff that happens on the network that it's just things you wouldn't even think about. It's just things. I'll give you like a quick story. Like we had that I've told on here before. Well, I was working as a SOC analyst, and we had somebody try to steal sensitive information and send it to another. I don't know how to. I don't want to give too much. I'm not trying to die out here in these streets, so I'm not going to say a lot. But somebody, let me just tell you like this: somebody who was working in our organization, who was a security person, took sensitive information, scanned it, and tried to send it to bad people. You just wouldn't think of stuff like that. You just wouldn't think, well, who would do something like that, right? But as a SOC analyst, I got to see that. It gives you a whole different perspective on what people are willing to do, human nature, and insider threats and everything. Right? I knew you have denial of service attacks, or you have viruses, or you have stuff like that, but that was like something I'd never seen before. I was shocked. I was like, what the hell why would you do that? I don't understand. I mean, especially knowing that they didn't know, I guess, but they monitor everything you do on those networks. In the DoD, they're watching everything you're doing. Let me see. Mr. Brown says, I just started as a risk analyst at Walmart, and GRC covers a lot more than I thought. Wow, I have so many questions for you. So you're a GRC, you're doing GRC, you're a risk analyst at Walmart? Dude, are you still on this call? I have so many questions. Hey, Mr. Brown, if you're still on here, if you are, I have some questions. Okay, so what standard did they use in Walmart? What framework and standard do they use? PCI DSS, I'm sure. But do they use anything else? Do they use NIST 800? Another question for Walmart. Well, I have questions you probably can't answer on here. I have questions about what firewall to use. I'm curious about what tools do you guys use? I don't know if you can divulge any of that information, but I want to know like what cybersecurity tools does Walmart use? And what's their biggest threats? Where is there probably fraud? If I had to guess, I'd say Walmart's biggest threat is customer fraud. Data loss prevention is probably their biggest threat. I guess he's gone. Man, I have so many Walmart questions, man. So curious. Never known anybody working at Walmart before, and I want to know about their security, what they do, what's their frameworks, how they go about it. Okay, let me see here. Ryan says SOC analyst jobs. SOC analyst job is to keep the chair from hitting the ceiling until it's time to act. It's the Roadhouse rule. I want you to be nice until it's time for me to be not nice. Yeah, SOC analyst work was really, really interesting. The stuff I learned there, I was able to take with me and understand a lot more about cyber threat intelligence, about what kind of threats to look for, attack frameworks, knowing how these attacks look when you're sitting on the inside. And it's shift work sometimes. It's difficult. It can be boring and stuff. I mean, if you don't find things to do, like I found things to do while I was there. I was learning a lot of stuff there. I was very interested in it. I like set up like a lab to do hacking and stuff to see how the packets look. I was a maniac. But yeah, what Ryan means when he says that your job is to keep the chair from hitting the ceiling is that it's shift work and you're sitting there watching a screen and then you're sitting watching data. Just like waiting for something to happen, and then, not most of the time it's a bunch of false positives, or the system is incorrectly alerting you of something that's not a threat or not a security incident, and you have to figure out, okay, like, what is this? Why are we seeing this? A lot of stuff we saw was configuration issues, like something in the network was configured weird, and then it would just it would look like a denial of service attack or whatever. Let me see here. Other questions. I'm not gonna be on here long, guys. I'm on here early because I got some stuff to do today. See. Baker says, wait, let me see if I got the Walmart dude on here. And he's gone. Damn it. If you happen to work for Walmart, I have some questions for you. If you are a cybersecurity or IT person working for Walmart or any giant retailer, I have some questions for you. Baker6 says, for GRC, learning NIST, CSF, RMF, and do technical labs. Yes. Yep. All those things will help you out. I would also add ISO 27001. That's a popular one these days. And then definitely do those labs. Baker6 says also, he says, advice, continue learning on your own. There's so much education programs out there. Yes, there's so many things that you can learn. There's so many different tools you can use, especially these days, man. There's so much. I remember, when I first started, when I was a network engineer, before they had as many tools as you have now with like GNS3 or Boson, like all these software solutions where you can like put a fake network and then like see how the switch and the router talk to each other and do routing protocols and set up stuff like that. And now you got AI. But when I was first doing it, I would go on Craigslist and buy a router from somebody who had already taken their CCNP or CCNA. I would buy a router from them, like a real Cisco router, and then I would set them up in my house and then just mess around with it that way. But these days, you have so many tools that you can use to help you to learn. Okay, let's see what else we got here. I always encourage my analysts to pursue technical training to have a better understanding. That's awesome. Wow, this is an awesome community. I've got a bunch of cybersecurity professionals jumping on here, helping each other out. It's really always great to see. Just being knowledgeable of SIEM is a great skill. Yeah, absolutely. Any SIEM that you know is great, because you can take that information on ArcSight and it'll help you to understand what's going on with Splunk or whatever other SIEMs are out there. The more technical you can be, much more better a GRC analyst you'll be. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Just joining, I'd like to do forensics. Forensics is huh? Oh yeah, it's just sleeping right now. Forensics is a great field to get into. What you might want to do is do SOC analyst work for that too, because SOC analysts, at least where I was at, we were doing cybersecurity analyst work, and we not only had to work with people who specialize in incident response. Look, we had a whole team to come together like the Avengers to do incident response, but also we work with forensics people. So we had to know a little bit of the tools that they would use, because there were some incidents that took more time, and we would pass those along to the forensics guys who would do a really deep analysis of whatever system we had an incident on. So why I'm suggesting doing SOC analyst work is because you have to learn a bunch of fundamentals that are essential to becoming a digital forensics person. So and there's more jobs out there to do SOC analyst work, whereas forensics, I don't even know how you get into forensics. I don't even know how you get into it because those guys have a deep level of knowledge that usually they're coming from other fields. They're usually coming from other fields, honestly. And I can see a clear path from being a SOC analyst to being a forensics person because you're using some of the same tools and stuff, and you have to know a lot about networking and cybersecurity and security best practices and all that kind of stuff. Can you have multiple operating systems listed on an accreditation package? Oh yeah, absolutely. ATOs, I mean, I've never done an ATO that didn't have more than one operating system. And an ATO is an authority to operate, authorization to operate, authorization to operate, authorization to operate. And you have to have an accreditation package that finalizes. Okay, let me back up. All right. So an organization has to have a certain level of security. It's called a security posture. There's a certain level of security that the organization is supposed to operate at. And that is like a certain confidence level that we have. We have our firewall has a certain rules and features it has to have. Our workstations, our endpoint devices all have a certain level of security. We have scanning being done. We have a certain level of confidence on our security level, right? You have to update that every so often. It could be once a year, it could be every 3 years. It depends on the organization. And in the government, it's like every 3 years, let's say, right? So every 3 years, you have to do this huge assessment of your organization. Like you're looking at all the security controls all the security features. You're looking at everything. You're doing a scan saying, okay, what security features are not on? The ones that we do have on, are they effectively applied? Is there any documents we need to update? You're looking for gaps in the system, all the weaknesses. You're looking for all the weaknesses and you're saying, okay, can we live with these weaknesses? Can we live with them? If not, we might have to have an emergency and say, okay, look, we're going to give you a temporary authority to operate. Like we're going to allow you to operate for some time, but then we're going to shut it down if you don't do this in X amount of months or whatever. So you're doing this 3-year assessment where you're looking at everything, looking at all the controls, and then you're documenting all of it. And at the end of it, you have a report, security assessment report. And that security assessment report has all the main things where you went wrong or what you have to fix. And that is sent to the head of agency. And that person is going to look at it and they're going to say, okay, is this an acceptable level of risk? And if it is, they'll sign off and say, okay, we can operate for 3 more years. I can live with this, the remaining risks here. We'll fix all these other things here. But the team's got it. They've got all the plans how they're going to fix all these main things. I'm going to sign off on it. And what they do is they have to evaluate whether or not they're going to sign off on that. They have what's called an accreditation package. That's like everything, all the scans, all the documents, any kind of organizational engineering, anything that they can evidence that they're doing the security properly. That's in the accreditation package. And it's evidence that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And then they sign off on that accreditation package, and then it can operate for 3 more years. And it's a lot of work. All the ones that I've done, to answer the question, have at least 2 operating systems. You have different server operating systems, you have different workstation operating systems. Hell, you might have appliances on there that have different operating systems. So normally they're going to have more than one. They typically call it, if you have a large environment, it's called a government support a general support system, and you have a bunch of, like, say, Windows systems and then a bunch of Linux systems or whatever, and they'll call it a mixed mode environment where users are having to log on to different systems. It's harder to maintain those because if you have two different ways to do audit logs, do two different ways to do two different systems you have to maintain and keep up to date. And but yeah, they normally, the systems that I've been a part of, the accreditation package, they have more than one operating system. Did you start off in the help desk? Yes, I did. I started off in the help desk in the military. Actually, it started off in a whole different career. I was a security forces person. I worked with the Army and the Marines, and I was a weapons specialist, and that's what I did for the first 4 years I was in the military. And then I realized this is not really what I want to do. I can't see myself being a police officer or physical security on the outside. This is not what I want to do. I was obsessed with computers. I was just a big nerd. And then I cross trained. That's why I always tell people, start where you are. I cross trained from being a weapons specialist to computer operator. That's what they called it in the Air Force at the time. Um, they call it computer and communications operator. And I cross trained into that. And the first thing they have you do after you go through this, like, I don't know, 6-week training where they're teaching you Unix and networking, and it's like a 6-week boot camp where they just cram all this information in your head. Then you go to your first duty station, and you're a help desk guy. And I was a help desk guy. I was a sergeant who was a help desk guy for a while, and then they start having me do all this other stuff. Like, I did a little bit of networking stuff, and then I was a network um, professional for a little bit, and then they had me doing. There was a job where all I was doing is taking all the equipment that was being put out of service, all the equipment that they were done with. I was putting that stuff in a database, and that was my job. I was just take the equipment, we take the hard drive out, destroy it, and then we would track all the information, all the stuff that they were gonna get rid of. And then I'd start doing certification and accreditation, which is risk management framework, what they call it now. Let me see here. More questions. Appreciate you guys' questions and everything. I'm gonna be cutting this thing short here real soon. Had to start early because I got some stuff to do today. But okay, got another question. Evergreen says, do you see many people dealing with CMMC? And then Baker 6 says CMMC is involved more on government agencies. Um, I'm I'm not personally not doing CMMC stuff in my job right now. The people who I have met who do CMMC have been doing these lives. And so CMMC people are people who work with contract or private sector organizations who do work directly with the Department of Defense. And they use a portion of NIST 800 controls. I believe it's called NIST 800-171, but I'm not absolutely certain on that. It's not my main thing. I'm Googling it right now as I'm talking to you because I'm not super smart on CMMC. The last guy I was talking to, and I regret not asking him, was Will Reed, who I did an interview with, and he is a CMMC guy. And CMMC is Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And yeah, it is used by organizations who have a a contract directly with the Department of Defense, and they're trying to secure their systems that have an interaction with the Department of Defense. Something like that. I've met a few people on here who do CMMC. One was Lisa. I know she does CMMC, and then ones will read, and then a couple other people who do it. So it's out there. I was thinking about coordinating with one of them and doing some information about it, putting something together about it, because I know the rule set. I know like the security controls that they use. Like when I was reading about them, I was like, oh, this is part of NIST 800. I know this, but it's a little bit, their process is a bit different. And here it is right here. If you happen to be watching me on YouTube, there's a CMMC model, and I believe they went from .1 to or from 1.0 to 2.0. But I don't know a lot about it. I have not dug into this heavily, but here it is. Do people use it? Absolutely. There's a few people I know who are skilled at it and are working with it right now. Berg says, I'm a network engineer. How do I get into GRC? So from network engineering, there's a few things I would suggest you do. I went from network engineering to GRC work. I did GRC work. I mean, I did network engineering before I did it. And there's some differences. Number one, like, do you really want to do it? It's not as exciting as network engineering. There's not as much movement as network engineering. It's not as technical as network engineering. But how can you go from network engineering to GRC work? So GRC work is governance, risk, and compliance. So governance piece is management of IT infrastructure. The R is for risk management, risk consulting, risk overall, managing the risk of an organization. So that gets into your auditors, your assessors, things like that. And then the C is for compliance. That's how does our organization comply with the industry or government state regulations? There's a lot of jobs in that three set of things I just said. There's a lot of different jobs. Now, all of those have a lot of documentation, a lot of meetings, a lot of documentation. So to go from network engineering, what I would suggest is to learn the frameworks. More than likely, if you've done network engineering, the thing is you've probably been working with a framework and just didn't know it. Because as a network engineer, you don't have to know NIST 800. You don't have to know necessarily PCI DSS. You don't have to know. You just need to know where do you guys want your network? What IPs do you want? Here's your VLAN. Here's your subnet. You don't have to know the actual frameworks and regulations. But the thing is, the things that you're doing on your networks, if you're building a LAN, if you're managing a WAN or whatever you happen to be doing, the organization is telling you to do that based off of regulations that they have. Example would be PCI DSS. If you're working with retail, you're working with somebody using a lot of point of sale devices, there's a certain way they're supposed to do the network. They're supposed to isolate everything on the point of sale device. Like that network is only supposed to have point of sale information on it, and I believe it's supposed to be encrypted. So they would only just tell you, hey, we need a separate network. You'd say, well, how many IPs do you need? And they said, well, we need X amount. And you say, okay, well, that's a class, whatever. Here you go. Here's the IPs. And hey, we need it encrypted. Okay, here's the types of encryption. You would apply the encryption, and that be it. You need to know as a GRC person what regulation that they're using, what security policy that they're using to tell you to do that. So if you happen to be in the retail industry, you need to know PCI DSS. If you are in the government, you need to know NIST 800, NIST CSF. If you happen to be in a contracting space that's working with the government, you might need to know CMMC or NIST 171. I believe that's what it is. And then if you're in healthcare, you have to know, okay, what does HIPAA say about networking? You see what I mean? You need to know what's the security policy behind the net, why the network is supposed to be formed the way it is. And so if you've been a network engineer, you'll be in a certain industry. So it should guide you in the direction of the regulations or framework. You need to read that and understand that you've already implemented that. And then you can put that on a resume. Writing, technical writing is also really important. As a network engineer, you don't do much of that. You might create a network diagram, you might do a simple report for someone, but it's not in depth. The in-depth level of technical writing you have to do as a GRC person. All these GRC, whether it's the government, the governance or risk side or compliance, they all do a lot of technical writing. You need to know how to communicate with people. So one thing you could do to practice that would be to look at what a security policy, read security policy, number one. Let's start from there. Read the security policy of wherever you're working and understand what they're talking about. They're going to talk about things outside of network engineering. They're going to talk about your focus as a network engineer is like, okay, like IP addresses, subnet mask, the gateway, routers, switches. You need to be, when they start talking about access controls, you need to pay attention. When they start talking about physical security, you need to pay attention. When they start talking about, they're going to talk about a whole bunch of other stuff that is usually outside of your wheelhouse. You need to pay attention to that stuff as they mention that on the security policy. Read their security policy. From there, the security policy will tell you about regulations. Reading the security policy will allow you to get a exposure to the types of writing that you're going to have to do. Another thing that you could either practice or take a look at is risk documents, risk assessment documents. So normally, especially as a risk management consultant or a risk management type person, you'll have to do like a risk assessment report, and that will break down have an executive summary, and then it'll have like all the technical stuff. Get familiar with that by take a look, especially if you happen to be in the industry already. Take time to look through the risk assessment report. So yeah, writing is really important. Communication, really important. Get familiar with the standards of your industry and the frameworks of your industry. Those are a couple of things that you can do right off the bat. There's already security things that you do as a network engineer too. There's a bunch of security features that you put on your switches, on your routers. You need to put that on your resume. Like you need to articulate how you've been putting security on the entire enterprise, because that's what you've been doing. Whether it's port security or backing up the actual config files, disaster recovery, being a part of that process. Those are the kinds of things that go into GRC work. You've already done a lot of it. You just need to explain what you have done to help out the governance, the risk, and the compliance. Okay, I got another question here, and I think this is going to be my last question. I've been talking for about an hour and 23 minutes. Thank you guys for joining me early. This is my last question, and August says, I know you might have seen this question a lot, but what is the entry-level position IT I can apply for? What is an entry-level position IT I can apply for? There's a few. So, and before I let you know what this is, you should know that you can get in with little or no experience. It will be difficult. The initial jobs won't pay a lot, but you got to start somewhere. Another thing is people, although I always say you can get in with little or no experience, not easy, but you can do it. You can't get in without knowledge. You have to know something. So before you even start, sit down and start to understand the basics of information technology. They're not going to hire you without knowing something. So start somewhere. Like, you got to start to actually get the knowledge in your head, and hands-on is really the best thing you can do. All right. And then let me show you something. Let me see here. What jobs? Your question was what kinds of jobs? And what I'm going to do, if you happen to be watching me on YouTube, is I'm going to show you my screen. I'm on LinkedIn once again. And what you want to look for is help desk is one of the jobs. I'm just going to type in help desk, and we're going to take off the remote jobs. There's not as many remote jobs here. So we're going to look at everything. Right now, you're not targeting just remote jobs, or you're not going to come in making six figures or anything crazy. You're going to have to start just like all of us. You got to start from the bottom. And help desk is one of those ways. Is a great way to start, actually. So I'm looking at all the help desk jobs, and I see 156 results, which is wrong. Oh, that's in the past week. That's why. So I'm searching for the past week, and these are all on-site jobs all throughout the U.S. And let's just kind of cherry pick one of these jobs here. This first one, help desk support specialist. And this job is shift work. It's $25 an hour. It's on site. It's in Kentucky, Florence. And they don't have any. Wait, they do have requirements. Okay, requirements is 1 year of experience with Windows 11, authorized to work within the United States, 1 year of work experience with barcode scanners. You notice they didn't mention anything about high school. They didn't mention anything about college. That's why you want to start with help desk jobs, because they're allowing you to come in without being some kind of 3-year subject matter expert in some cases. Now some do, but that's why you got to look through these. Now, help desk is not the only thing. Let me show you some other job titles that you could see. Help desk, help desk, help desk, help desk. Search through these. Associate computer user support specialist. That's another keyword. Support specialist. Help desk support specialist. Help desk support. Technical support specialist. Let's look at that one. Technical support. Because that's another keyword that you want to check out. Technical support specialist. Again, you're gonna have to get the knowledge. Like, there's no way around it. You're gonna have to take the time to get to know the information, and that's where it weeds a lot of folks out, because they don't want to take the time to get to know this information. They kind of want to get rich quick. They want to just jump in, and then suddenly you're making six figures or whatever. It just doesn't work that way. Technical support. Let's see. This is one says desktop lifetime tech lead, information management specialist, tech support specialist, computer system professional. So tech support is another one that you can do. Let's look at that. Help desk, tech support, customer support specialist. These are the kinds of things that you should be looking for. Now, I'm on LinkedIn right now, and it's really keying in towards because I've completely filled out my profile. So it's really looking for jobs that would suit me. But if you fill out your entire LinkedIn profile, your Monster profile, Dice profile, as many as you can do, and put in there that you're looking for help desk entry-level positions or entry-level IT positions, that'll also work. And any kind of knowledge that you have, skills that you have, build those skills up so that when you put it on there, you're attractive to those employers, and then aggressively apply for these positions. That's what you want to do. Is it easy? No. Will it take time? It will take time. You can't be discouraged, but just know there's somebody out there looking for you. But you have to believe that it's possible before you even start. All right, guys, that's it. It's been an hour and 30 minutes. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for all your questions. Thank you especially to all of the actual IT professionals on here who are helping other people out as I'm speaking, because I can't talk to everybody. There's literally hundreds of people coming through here asking random, doing drive-bys on me. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I will talk to you next week. Really? Let me see. Let me see. Oh, Larry has some questions. All right. I just turned off TikTok, so I got a couple other things I could do here. How you doing, Larry? Larry says, I'll email you. Definitely know a decent amount about content creation and great stories about IT space. I would like to talk to you about project management. I think there's a market for that. Project management. I think you should message me about that, Larry. Let me see. Does the private or public sector emphasize certifications more in your opinion? Private sector emphasize certifications more in your opinion? I would say it depends on the job. Overall, the public sector is very rigid about what they want. They're very specific about what they want, what they're looking for. They've have established guidelines about it. I don't know that one looks for certifications more than the other. Off the top of my head, I can't think of them wanting one thing over the other. But I can say this: the public sector, government jobs tend to be, they have a list of things that they want, that they're looking for, right? And that comes from, I think it's because it's coming from the 8140 or the 8570. It's a document that tells you, here's what we want. It's going to be either that, a degree, or certain years of experience. They have some combination of those, but they're very prescriptive and they're very clear on what they want. Whereas the private sector is a little bit more loosey goosey with it. They don't have specific things necessarily that they're looking for. There are things they're looking for, but they're willing to. It seems like they're more open. I would say it just seems like, having worked in the private sector and public sector, the private sector is willing to take more risks if you can show your skills. Whereas the public sector, so I guess that's my answer. So I think the public sector is way more like, they're prescriptive. If you don't have this or that certification, they'll take this one, but it's going to be like a circle of things that they're looking for. If you don't have those, they want this degree. Or if you don't have those two things, they want a certain amount of years of experience. Whereas the private sector, when I did interviews with them, if you could come in there and blow their freaking minds, then they could look past certain things that you don't have. Like, if you could come in there and blow their freaking minds, they'll hire you on the spot, because they're really looking for, a lot of times the private sector, they really want a hardworking person who can show some real talent. They're hungry for that person who's going to come in there and hit the ground running, and they're willing to look past certifications. I would say the public sector. So that's a great question. Now that I'm thinking about it, the wheels are turning, because having done interviews with both, I just noticed that the public sector really wants specific things, whereas the private sector, if I come in there and I just blow their minds, they want to hire me on the spot. If I can solve their solution and they can hit the easy button and pay me money, then they'll do it. All right. That's it. Thank you, Larry, for your question. I really appreciate you guys, everybody on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. I'm gonna keep this thing going. I got some stuff coming, so please pay attention, be watching, because I got some more stuff coming real soon. Namely a book, but I got other stuff coming too. All right, guys.